everybody. Welcome back for another live stream of tutorial setup. Not tutorial setup. Telemetry setup. Okay. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going over the absolute basics of telemetry and how to set it up, how to look at it, what we're going to do, and as far as really dipping your toes into the water of telemetry. Excuse me. And one of the big things about telemetry is that you don't really need it. So why the hell are you doing this tutorial? You don't need it, but it makes everything faster. Okay, so something very, very simple, as in, do I got my cambers right? Or is my splitter scraping the ground? Very typical questions that need to be answered during the setup process. And just like in the basic setup process tutorials series that we did, those are some of the first things that you have to look at, as far as, like, sealing the splitter off, getting your right heights and everything like that squared away. And then later on down the road, you get into optimizing your cambers and things like that. But you can do that all trial and error. There's no problem with doing that. The problem with doing that is that everybody, well, maybe not everybody, maybe you have all the time in the world, but a lot of people have constrictions on their time that they have to devote into making a setup that's comfortable for them to drive, that's fun for them to drive, that's competitive, and everything's like that. And I'm going to go out on a limb as I continue my pom-pom shaking for new tire Model 7. When new tire Model 7 comes out, and if it delivers on a lot of the things that those guys are saying that it's going to deliver on, from iRacing and the developers and Dave Kamer and everything like that, that telemetry is going to help in making this process much, much faster of setting a car up. Because you're going to be able to optimize your cambers versus what you have now. In some of the series and things like that, we just max cambers out and all this other kind of stuff, and you abuse the tires because you can, because they don't explode. But I'm not going to get on that soapbox again, I promise. But I'm just saying, telemetry is going to help you get that process accomplished a lot faster than if you would just go out and do trial and error, like do a run, increase camber, do another run, increase camber, do another run, wash, rinse, repeat, things like that. And another big thing is, like I mentioned, the front splitter, especially in the Gen 6 car, which you're going to be using today. You want to get the splitter as low to the ground as possible without scraping. You want to get it as level to the ground as you possibly can. And you can keep doing that in iRacing, and you can just look at your external camera views, and you can check that out and see. But how iRacing does their stuff is the actual surface of the road is just beneath, the actual physical modeled surface of the road is just beneath the graphics of the road. So, like, the picture of the road is laid on top of the actual surface of the road. So it's kind of hard to really, as accurately as you need to make sure you get your splitter down in parallel level. You can get it ballpark, then there's just a lot of trial and error. Then there's still a lot of guesswork. So one of the things that I really want to do is get folks just their toes wet in telemetry, and it's just my nature just to kind of go crazy and to get a little more in depth than I intend to. But I try and keep it as layman terms as possible, and keep it as simple as possible. And I really try and explain things so that, like, if you have no experience on a subject, that you can comprehend what I'm saying and wrap your head around it. At least not if the first viewing of a tutorial, maybe after the second viewing, or maybe even the third. So without further ado, let's come over here to iRacing, and what we're going to do is look at some of the things that you're going to need straight off the bat, okay? There are two different telemetry programs that you need. One is called Atlas. And to be honest, I started off with Atlas, and I moved over to Motec because, and this is kind of an unfair statement, and I'll qualify it like that right off the bat. I liked the customizable aspects of Motec a lot more than I liked how Atlas was. But the problem with that is that I didn't know anything about telemetry or anything about programming telemetry whenever I started Atlas. Okay, so like I was in Atlas, I probably used it for a couple months, and then I switched over to Motec, and I've been using that for years. So to be completely honest, I didn't give Atlas a chance. But if you like Atlas, I'll try and find it, as a matter of fact. I don't even know where the heck it's at. I had it somewhere on my computer before. Atlas Telemetry. So, telemetry. Okay, so here it is. All right. Where the heck do you download this thing at? Is this it? It's on here someplace. Products. I don't know. But it's through McLaren, as you can see. If I'm sure if you go on to the in the forums, there's a telemetry forum in there, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But for now, I'm gonna do Motec because that's what I'm most familiar with. That's what I've been using for years. I like it, and I'll be able to explain a lot of the stuff that I want to explain better using Motec than I would jump into Atlas completely cold and not be able to figure out how the thing works. So when you come into Motec, you know, it's motec.com.au home, okay? And I'm going to link this in the description after the stream processes and stuff. So you come into there, go to downloads, go software. It was easier because they had a drop-down menu. Okay, so they got a lot of stuff here. All right, so what do you want? Okay, you can see I believe it or not, I just upgraded to this. I've been using like 4 versions old telemetry for Motec for years, and I finally just said, well, I'm gonna upgrade just to see for this tutorial, and it's badass. Like, it is so much nicer aesthetically than the old one. That I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty stoked. So it's pretty simple. This is the one you want. It works. I've tried it. It is actually compatible with old Motec projects that you have created, or I should say that I've created. So if you want to upgrade, I upgraded this, and I had stuff from oh heck, what the version I had before, like this is 1.14. I think I had like 1.02.0333 or something like that. Like, it was old. Okay, so to save it, I've already done this. So click on that, do the install. Okay, and here's the major difference between Motec and Atlas. All right, but I don't want to get off on a tangent. So you download it, you install it, and it's going to come up with, where'd my new Motec thing go? That's not it. Is it over here? Ah, it's over here. Sorry, I have to move stuff around. Okay, so here it goes coming up. It's so much nicer. So you come over here, okay? So that's the new version of Motec. You can see it automatically found all my other projects that I have, okay? And that's an older project. That's actually from a guy on the telemetry forums. Really smart dude. This project here has more stuff in it than you can possibly imagine that you can probably even use. But we're not going to do that. We're going to create a new workspace. And so after you get all this thing installed, we're going to create this new workspace, okay? And new workspace wizard. Circuit, drag. Oh, this is neat. The other one didn't do this. Circuit. We're going to name this Gen 6 tutorial. You can name it whatever you want. Okay. Okay. And this is what it comes up with. Okay. The default project for Motec has a decent amount of stuff in it. Okay. And you can manipulate all this. All right. But first things first. Okay. The major difference between and I need to cover this before I tell you how to load up to actual telemetry files from iRacing. Is the major difference between Atlas and Motec is that Atlas will read the telemetry output files from iRacing straight away, whereas Motec needs the file that iRacing puts out as far as like the telemetry run. It needs to be converted into something that Motec can use. And we do that. Somebody made a very simple, convenient program called Mu. Mu, kind of like cat, but not. Mu is the it's a Greek term. I forget what Mu actually stands for. I could look it up, but at any rate, this is it. This is the link right here. Again, I'll link to it. GitHub.com. Patrick Moore. Thank you, Patrick, for this. It is awesome. Mu releases. Okay, Mu installer, and you go through the typical download, install kind of thing. All right, and whenever Mu starts, you'll see it down here. Where is it at? There it is. No, there it is. Mu. Let's pull this up. Okay. So after you download and you install this, okay, you can pull this over, and this is Mu, okay. You can set up the configuration in Motec, what units you want. It doesn't really matter. Then you have to tell that where the input and the export directory is for the files. Okay, you have to tell it where iRacing drops the telemetry file that it produces during a testing run, and that's going to be in right here, documents, iRacing, telemetry, and where you want it to export it to. You obviously that you can put it wherever, and we're going to see. I'm going to show you where this comes into in a little bit, because you have to tell Motec where to go to look for the telemetry files. I just keep it in the same place. Okay. It just kind of keeps everything co-located, and I don't have telemetry files running all over the computer. So here's an interesting thing, because I have a horrible memory, and I get so into getting into testing and everything like that that I just hop in a car and just start racing, and I do like a 10-lap stint, and I realize after I get out, whenever I load up Motec and start trying to load in the telemetry, that it isn't there because I forgot to turn the damn thing on. So you can have Mu actually turn it on for you whenever you go out onto the track. And I'll show you that in a second whenever we get actually into the car. So this is an interesting one too. You can limit the export of the files. Okay, it'll only do that if you hit this lap limit. Okay, so you have like your out lap. Say like you have your out lap and you crash on your first lap. Okay, instead of it filling up your computer with partial runs that really mean nothing to you, that you can't use because you haven't warmed up the tires, you haven't done anything, you haven't like got comfortable on the track or anything like that. So you're really not going to get any useful information out of a half of a lap of telemetry. So what you can do here is you can say, all right, Mew, don't do anything unless I get one good lap in, or you can make it 4 laps or 5 or whatever the heck you want. I just like 1 because if you get through 1 lap, chances are you're going to have some usable data from 1 lap. Because say like if you really screwed something up and your splitter's digging, and you run like 1 lap and say for the Gen 6, like the car just every time you go into the corner, the car just plows straight up into the wall. You know, you have to know why it's doing that, and if you don't have a lot of experience in doing that and knowing why the car is performing that way, like if I go into a corner, you know, being on the service for so long, and I hit the corner and the car just goes bat into the wall, I'm like, splitter's digging into the ground. Then you can go back and you can fix it. But like if you're new and you're like, why the heck's it doing this? Or if it's not really doing it bad, but you're washing up the track like 2 lanes and you just don't understand why, you know, you can get 1 or 2 laps in and you're going to realize that I'm not going to get any usefulness out of this run, but it's doing something bad. At least you can say, all right, I got 1 or 2 laps in. Let me go look and see what the heck this thing's doing in telemetry. Okay. Remove iRacing telemetry. Okay, this is another big one. All right. Because, like I said, is iRacing, after you do a test stint in the sim and you're recording telemetry, it'll output the file, the iRacing telemetry file, to your folder that is up there, that we put right in here, in the iRacing telemetry. Okay, so it'll do that, and then Mew, like I said, has to create a new file that allows Motec to read, that Motec can read. Okay, so for every run that you do in telemetry, you actually get 2 files, which doubles the space that is taken up on your computer. So what Mew does is it'll say, okay, he ran a 2-lap stint. It reads the file output from the raw file from iRacing, converts it, then goes back and deletes that original iRacing output file. So what you have left is just a file that Mew made for Motec. So essentially, you just cut your storage use in half, roughly half. Because I think the two files are very different sizes. But I haven't looked at it in a long time. Again, it doesn't matter. The only thing you need to know is that it erases the output file from iRacing and leaves you with the converted file that Motec can use. Okay. Show settings on startup. Sure, if you want. It's just a pop-up that'll come up. Save current setup. This is neat. And I go back and forth with this because, although I probably should. So what it'll do is it'll take your current setup and it'll export it into the export telemetry directory after you're done with the stint. So what you can do is you can go out, you can make these changes to the car and go out and do a stint, come back, go out and do a stint, come back. And then you can go back into Motec and you can compare, you know, one run that you liked versus another run that you liked a little bit less versus another run that you liked a little bit better. And then you can just go back and like, okay, this is what the setup was. And then just go and throw that setup back in. Okay? Sometimes I want to do it. Other times I don't want to do it. I just have my own process, I guess, that I save a lot of everything. But the more that I sit in here and talk about it, the better that is, because sometimes you just can't remember on version 8 of a setup what version 2 produced as far as the Motec, because it's really hard to say I used version 4 on this Motec, this output thing for Motec. You'll see that in a second. So that's Mew, and it'll run in the background. You can even click it out, and it'll still be just chilling right there. Mew. What is that? Motec device discovery. Huh. Interesting. I downloaded another thing from Motec that had to do with differential control. I downloaded that and loaded it up just to see what it would do, and it does nothing. It doesn't work. So, okay, so we got the 2 files that we need. to go into telemetry. We got the actual telemetry software for Motec, and then we got Mu. Okay, that'll convert the files that iRacing outputs into something that Motec can read. Okay, so we can get rid of both of these, and I'll put those links into the description so it'll be easier to download. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So here we go. Most of this stuff is pretty simple. One of the things that you use a lot is workspace. Okay, like I work on a lot of different cars, and so I've made projects for all of them. So here's Gen 6 Williams FW31. A shameless plug. I'm looking to start and I have been for a long time, and a fixed Formula One league. I'm really trying to put it together, and I got most of it together. I just got into racing season last year, and that just consumed all my time. There's another FW31 league that started, but it's open. Clayton McLeod opened it up. It's called Batteries Not Included, which is a pretty fun one. It's you got a lot of people already involved with it, but mine's going to be during the week, just because my weekends are so consumed either with racing or doing stuff with my fiance. I really don't have any time on the weekends to run a league, so this is going to be during the week. And if it's during the week, I kind of like fixed, just because it's it's just for people to hop in, have fun, who like F1, and hop in and race. You don't got to put a lot of time effort into making setups and stuff. So got the Gen 6, and that's the one we just made. But this option here, to cut to the chase, allows you to hop between projects that you use on a normal basis. Okay, so we're already in the Gen 6 tutorial, so we'll do that. Now you can do save workspace. I know the old version that I used automatically saved any changes that you did to the project, automatically saved it. So we'll see if that works, but we're going to do our saves as we go along. Edit, kind of the same thing. View, kind of the same thing. This right here, layout editor. Okay. When you come into this, you can, let me just do something here. Right click. Okay, so you can like make new worksheets. You can delete worksheets. You can do all this stuff in here by doing that, or you can come into the layout editor, and because you have these different windows here. Because so each window that you have, and I'm going to get to that here in a second. I probably should do that. So layout editor, you can come in and you can do different stuff. So over here, these are kind of like chapters of the book, okay? And then inside here is like your paragraphs of a book. Or, yes, you can do that like that. So like you can come in and you can change through all these different ones. And then, so for the stuff for like engine, you can say, okay, here's different pages that I want to use, or worksheets is what they call them, to look at different aspects of the engine, okay, how everything's working. Now, excuse me, keep in mind that this is for real cars, okay? And you may not, we don't have like mixture maps for iRacing. We do, but I don't think it's an output telemetry channel. And even if it is, it doesn't matter, because you're going to do your fuel usage anyway. And I'll show you that whenever we get into the first couple runs. You'll be able to see exactly what iRacing puts out. So this right here is really general, that Motec said, okay, just about every real car that we're going to have that uses our telemetry gathering system is going to output all this stuff. So this is just basic output stuff. So these are called, what do they call these things now? They changed the actual name. They call them windows? They call them windows now? No, they call them workbooks. Okay. So you can create a new workbook. All right. So you can do it that way, or you can come up to layout editor, and then you can move these things around. I'm sure you can move them up, you can move it down. You can create a copy if you want to. So that's pretty much that. Clues. And here's where you come in and you can add different things. And these are all grayed out now. They will not be grayed out once you load in an actual telemetry run. So these are all the different ways that you can present data, and I'll go through all this stuff once we get there. And select data is kind of the same thing as that. I guess the proper name for everything is a log file. So any telemetry that you have to run, the iRacing produces a log file, and then, like I said, Mu translates that and converts that into something that Motec can use. Okay. Component and things like that, never really got into this stuff. I'm not quite sure if this has to do with the actual pieces of equipment on the actual real race car, but I never use it. And this one here you're going to use a lot. Okay, this maths is essentially all the formulas that you want to use to manipulate existing channels that iRacing puts out, and you want to use a couple different channels to present a new piece of information for you. And the first thing that we're going to do with that is I'm going to show you how to get a rough, very rough estimate on splitter height for the Gen 6 car, or pretty much anything with a splitter, I guess. But it's really important for the NASCAR type vehicles because the splitter is so critical. So what that does is for the NASCAR vehicle, real quick, the only really telemetry output channel that it has is a center front splitter sensor. That's it. It only shows you the height of the center front splitter, but it doesn't tell you what the other sides of the splitter is doing, what the left side's doing, what the right side's doing. So we need to know what if the right side's digging in, if it's parallel to the ground and things like that. So this is what we're going to go over real quick as an example of how to manipulate the information that iRacing puts out in their telemetry channels. Okay, so that's the most thing that you're going to do with tools. Then help. All right, so here we are. We got Mu running, we have Motec running, and we're ready to start accumulating race data. All right, so minimize all that. Yes, I'm still here. We're going to use Charlotte, and for the sake of ease, I put the weather. I was going to do all the minimum stuff. Yeah, let's make it cold. I don't feel like sliding around. Cold, cold, overcast. Okay. We'll do this during the day. You know what? Hell with it. Let's do it at night. I like night tracks. I'm a night racer. Local short tracks. So we're going to use the Camaro, just because I'm a Chevy guy. Failed credential check, as usual. Take that, iRacing. Yay. Nectar of the gods. Okay. So, Mu looks at when iRacing starts, and so it's going to start up telemetry already. And so that's a pretty cool feature that, what was his name, Patrick Taylor, put into it. So that was really awesome. So here we go, race to Charlotte. And I guess I could say, like, one of the first things that I did was I found telemetry whenever I started racing and things like that, and iRacing. Because that's just pretty much the type of person I am. Like, I need precision information, and it was always, I don't like guessing at things, I guess. You can call it OCD and different stuff like that. But I just never enjoyed guessing. So let me just double check and make sure that that OBS is actually looking at what it needs to look at. It is. Awesome sauce. So let's go and load up the basic fix setup for Charlotte Knight. I was fooling around at the new Sonoma layout that they're going to use the other day. Yeah, sure. Oh, Christ, the hell with it. No, I'll just go back later. Charlotte Knight. Okay, so here we are. And I'll do my initial scrutinizing of the setup as we look, because there's certain things I look for square off the bat. And if you guys were here for the part 1 of the setup tutorial thing, that's one of the things that I do. And I will tell you right now that you do not need 2 inches of split. In the back, 1 inch is probably even too much. And I'm actually going to show you the correct process that I use on the real race car and that I use in iRacing, and it actually works just as good in iRacing as it does in the real race car. And we're going to show you how you do that using telemetry and why. Christ, I hope I don't forget to do that. Oh, just a second. I forgot to load up my chat. Just a second. Sorry about that. Nope, that's old. Sorry. There we go. I forgot to load up the chat. So just in case anyone is actually watching, I'll have to look at the... There, let me turn off the whatchamacallit too. So I'll keep peeking over at that and looking. Okay, so let's take a quick look at everything here. Crossweight looks about normal for a moderately, I call it the moderate to high bank track. On the general rule of thumb for setting up oval cars is the lower the bank angle of the track, the higher the crossweight needs to be. So, and that's general. That generally works for traditional setups and things like that, like especially like short tracks and stuff like that. But once you start getting into ceiling splitters and everything like that for these advanced cars, it gets a little weird because of the dynamic weight transfer is manipulated a little bit differently because you're working with packers and bump springs and stuff like that just to keep the front splitter sealed and flat. So how you manipulate the weight dynamic transfer around the cars is going to be just a tad bit different. So steering ratio looks fine. Steering offset looks fine. If you guys don't know what steering offset does, I don't know where they come down to adjusting front tie rods. I really have no idea. Whenever I start getting into this, like I said, this is one of the reasons why I would like to actually sit down and talk to somebody from iRacing. But essentially, it's like taking the wheel off of the steering wheel or after the steering shaft, turning it, and just putting it back on. If you ever watch NASCAR, like at the beginning of the race when they're just getting in their cars, and they're strapping themselves in, they're going to take the wheel off and they're going to index it differently based on how the car is going to track as they go down the corner. Some drivers like to have the cocked off like this going down the straightaway, but when you go through the turns, they like to have the wheel like square, like you would be driving like a normal daily driver down a straight road. So that way they know if they're like this going through the corners, the car's pushing, or if it's like this, well, if you have to turn to the right, you're screwed anyway. But it's one of the simple ways that you can set up your wheel on the index of your wheel on the steering shaft. to see whether or not your car is pushing or not. Other people just use tape, but it depends if you like comfort or not. If you're more comfortable going through the corner with the wheel up and down, cool. If you're like me and don't really care, I like to have a little bit of a wheel into the car. But at any rate, that's that. Front brake bias, that's one of the last things we're going to do. Tape configuration. We could probably get away with 50. And you got to understand what that is going to do is that's going to increase the aerodynamic downforce on the nose of the car, so that may push the splitter down into the track. So I'm going to guess that whoever made this setup had it relatively close. Okay? Although I did see it in the forums that whoever made the setup for last week was just they were like plowing up the track with the front splitter. I saw that people were pissed, but I don't know. So let's look at the front sway bar. We used to do big bar soft split or soft shocks or soft springs. Yeah, BB, SSBB or BBSS, whatever the hell it is. Big bar soft springs. And I think they started going away with that just because, especially when you start using bump springs and things like that. This is back whenever you were actually using coil binding and things like that. So we kind of got away with that. But the front sway bar is generally center off. That's a center off adjustment. Obviously bigger is more understeer, or it'll tighten the car up. Arm asymmetry, we're going to get into this. I'm going to do like a specific sway bar tutorial. We're going to go through all these components on the car through this whole endeavor of mine on this YouTube channel. And like on my late model, we use pretty much a traditional sway bar. It's like a one-piece, just bent sway bar, just kind of like you would find in a mid-'80s car, or even now. I mean, they use sway bars; they don't really change. But NASCAR uses what they call a three-piece sway bar, which has a center shaft that's a certain diameter, and then on the ends it's splined. It's almost like an axle. It actually does look like an axle, but it's different kinds of steel because it needs to twist. So it's almost like a torsion bar also. How like IndyCar doesn't use springs, it uses torsion bars for their suspension. But at any rate, it's a center bar. It's designed to be a specific grade of steel, and it's designed to be at a certain diameter. And the smaller the diameter, the more it is allowed to twist. Okay? And then at the end of that, you will clamp on arms that go back to the lower control arms of the suspension of the car. And when we get to this, I'm going to actually show this to you, like I'm going to take a camera out to the garage and show you on the late model, like how all of this works, like how much link slack there is. And I think some other cars have like a solid link or a chain. I think that's like in the street stock, and I think the late models have it. I don't know if the super late has it or not. I haven't messed around with those guys in a long time. And preload, we're going to get into what preload does, and whether or not you actually even want to attach a damn thing. And this is actually important. I think that this little checkbox is one of the most misunderstood setup aspects of a car. The whole process of setting up a Gen 6 car. And I'm gonna tell you real quick. I don't want to get into this. This is a whole different tutorial, okay? But when we set up a car in the real world, okay, and we set ride heights. We'll go to the car. We'll set up initial ride heights. We will set up the initial cross weight of the car using the spring perches and stuff like that. That is all done with absolutely no preload on the bar. And on this case, what we can do, because it's a pain in the ass in the actual real race car, because it's a bolt, and you have to, like, if you want to disconnect the sway bar, you have to actually, like, sit there and unhook a bolt. And it's a pain in the ass. All we do is we just take out all the preload until you can just sit there with the bar and just shake it like this, and it's not pressing up against underside of the control arms. But in this car, when you set up your initial cross weight, you set it up with the bar unattached, okay? Because anything you do with the spring perches, you're going to start twisting that bar around. And you can see it if I just do this. Watch. Watch the preload. You know, you can start 84, 85, 88, 89, 90. Anything that you do is going to do that. Is going to change that bar. And you don't want that to happen. I had to click cancel and go back out. Okay, so you don't want the bar influencing your initial crossweight setup. Okay, you don't want the bar. The bar accentuates what you want the car to do center out. Okay, so think of it like I'm tuning up the car on entry through the center, and then we're going to adjust center out using the bar, and we're going to adjust center out using the preload and everything like that. So that's the one of the major, I think, misconceptions of setting up a stock car on iRacing is that people do it with the bar attached, and it literally just screws everything up. It makes setting up a car so much freaking more difficult. Okay, so essentially, real quick again, if you're going to start making adjustments, and we're going to do it here, is we're going to disconnect, unattach the sway bar, make our adjustments, and then we're going to attach that bar again, and then we're going to start increasing the preload, just depending on how our center off is. Okay, and we'll get into arm asymmetry in a little bit. Believe it or not, I figured out arm asymmetry and how that works using telemetry. I just noticed it one day, you know, when I was still running NIS. And I was like, holy shit, I never realized that change did that. And I'm going to show you how that works too in here, because it may or may not come into effect just depending on how the car's set up. But I'm still going to show it to you because it all ties into making up new channels to see what the left front splitter and the right front splitter is doing, and how the arm asymmetry affects when you go into the corner and you initially compress the suspension, how that splitter comes down. Is it coming down straight? Is it coming down rocking like this? Is it coming down rocking like that? You want it to come down straight, because if you start moving that back and forth, you start upsetting the car aerodynamically, and you can adjust that using arm asymmetry. I never knew that. I stumbled on it. But other than that, like I said, real quick, I know this is a telemetry thing, but I'm going to use this as a very, very brief Gen 6 setup stuff too, because we're going to be using this in looking at telemetry. It's actually going to all tie in. Okay, so you see this shock deflection here, okay? 4.74, 8.63, all right? So you have a total of 8.63 inches of shock deflection or change between the point that something on the shaft hits the body of the shock. So if you have the shaft, this is the body of the shock, and you have the shaft down here, and this is like connected to the suspension. It's going to come up and it's going to touch. How much distance you have there is what this deflection is on the shock. The spring deflection is how much distance the shocks have to compress before all the coils start to touch. So if like this is one coil and this is another coil, and you have like a whole bunch of coils, this is how much the spring total can go before the coils touch. All right. We used to do that. That's coil binding. All right. When we used to do coil binding setups, that's how we did it. Okay. But now with the bump shocks and the bumps, bump shocks, and now we have bump springs, and we'll go over that too during the whole shock bump spring bumps thing tutorial that's coming down the road. We'll get to that. But the big thing to think of here is we're going to be using this in telemetry. Okay, is this shock deflection here is how much travel the actual shaft of the shock has before something touches the housing of the shock. I'm being very specific when I say that, because that something is actually the shock spring or the bump spring. All right, why is this important? The bump springs in iRacing are 4 inches tall. Okay, well, that's not 4 inches, but they're 4 inches tall. All right, so this shock deflection you interpret that as you have 4.74 inches available of initial shock between the bottom of the shock to the top of the housing, okay? And 4 inches of that, 4 inches of this gets taken away by the bump spring, all right? So that really doesn't make any sense. I understand that because it's really hard to visualize, and I have a tutorial on the Gen 6 forum about that. So I'll show you it like this. You have 8.63 using the calculator, 8.63 inches of shock deflection available. Just because the car is already sitting on the ground, 4.74 of that total is already being used just because the car has compressed, okay? So minus 4.74, okay? So you have 3.89 inches taken up, right? Or should be left, but you don't because the shock spring is 4 inches tall, all right? And so what that means is that shock spring is already compressed, what, 0.11 inches? Okay, so you're already sitting on the shock spring. All right. So the easiest way for me to explain this to you, now that I probably just confused the living piss out of you, is that if you take this number minus that number, okay, if you subtract these two, and if you're above 4, you haven't hit the shock spring yet. There's some travel left in the shock before you engage the bump spring. That, okay? If it is less than 4, then you are already into, as we call it, the bump spring. So over here, 7.19, 3.20, I can tell you right now just by looking at it, you're into the bump spring by 0.01. All right, so you're just sitting on that bump spring. So the bump spring on the left is already engaged by about 0.11 inches, and the bump spring on the right, they're just sitting on it, okay? Why is this important? Because that is how you limit the travel. Believe it or not, packers and bump springs are nothing but travel limiting devices. That is all they are, okay? And because they're springs, they actually help with the dynamic weight transfer. But what we're doing right now is trying to figure out in telemetry if the front splitter is going to be level to the ground. Here's another quick way you can figure it out. So if you're not 100% sure, move the packer. If you move this packer and the ride height goes down, you know you're sitting on the bump spring. So we'll go down 2 clicks, and we're going to go from 2.834 down to 2.730, okay? So you know you're on the bump spring because as you move the packer up, you move the bump spring up the shaft of the shock, and we'll get into that later, but that's just a quick way to know. So like here, let's look at the right side, okay? 3.764, go down by that, 3.739, okay? So like I said, we were just on the bump spring because we were 0.01, remember? Barely moved. Didn't move. Didn't move. Okay, so as we are moving the packer down, we're moving the bump spring down, the shaft, okay? And so that means that we're getting further and further and further away from the top of the bump spring to the bottom of the shock housing, okay? So we're not moving the car up and down. But, you know, we come back into that. Where was it? 1.83? Yeah. So you can tell just there, 0.739. Move that packer up just a little more. Boom. 3.764. That's how you know that the bump spring is engaging with the bottom of the shock housing, or the top of the shock housing, however you're holding the shock. Okay, so there, everything you want to know about bump springs and packers that you were afraid to ask. Okay, so that's that. We really haven't changed anything else. We're not going to fool around with anything back here. I don't really want to get on my shock tirade right now, but we'll just do that. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to just get out here. We're going to run a session, okay? Okay. You see over here where it says telemetry, all right? If you didn't have telemetry automatically activated by Mu, this would be gone, okay? There's a hotkey for it in controls. Where the hell's the telemetry thing? Mark event. There it is. Toggle telemetry logging. Shift T. That's what I have it to. So I turned it off. Shift T turns it back on. But if you have it enabled in Mu, it's just going to start up automatically whenever you get into the sim. Okay. So here we are sitting in the car. You can't see my dashboard because I run triple screens and whatnot. So you really can't see all that. And I'm pretty sure somebody asked for this before, as far as looking and seeing what the I just want to make sure that down here, this the controls, the pedal controls and the wheels and everything like that are still showing up in telemetry or on the stream. Okay, cool. Because I wasn't sure if I changed it for one car and I wanted to make sure that it changes when you Alt K and you can move all these little windows around, if it worked for all these cars or if you had to do it by individual. So, oh, my frame rate sucks. I need a new computer. So, all right. So let's go out, and you can see in telemetry here. It may be. I hope it's on the actual stream, but telemetry. It'll look exactly like it was on the home screen on the UI, but it's the little speaker-looking thing is actually red. And that'll let you know that it's recording. So we'll do that. And I keep forgetting to turn off this stupid pit exit. So we're gonna go out. We're gonna run a couple laps. I haven't run that super. Actually, I like to do 10 lap runs on my own. That's what I'm actually doing. When I'm doing splitter work, when I'm trying to figure out what the splitter's doing, I only run five laps, because that's really all you need for the tires to heat up and everything like that. And I can't drive the car. That's all you really need to see what the splitter is going to be doing. And then later on is you get more into the setup process. I'll run 10 laps. If you guys don't know, I like Skull Bandit. I've always loved that paint scheme. So somebody made a halfway, well, not a halfway decent, it's pretty nice, Skull Bandit paint scheme and put it on Training Paints. So I'm using it. All right. So you can look, with the exception of the little lockup that I had, because I came in a little hot, and I can't help myself from evaluating how the setup is. We're pushing, and you could tell you were pushing. We knew we were pushing. You know, the front tires are 17 degrees hotter than the rears. And I'm just going to start to ask a couple guys throughout the forum, a couple of staff members, to help me out. I sent an email to just the general support email address for iRacing, and they messaged me back a couple of times like, what exactly do you want? And I don't know who answers that, or if they've passed my request along to anybody or anything like that, but I really haven't gotten much of a response in the past week, so I'm going to try a different way. But right now, really for the most part, you look at the inside two temps, just how as far as I can remember, how the tire is modeled. The outside isn't all that big of a deal, just on how the tire is modeled in slices. So yeah, we're pushing. All right, awesome, yay. Okay, so that's not the whole point of this. All right, so let's alt-tab out of iRacing. Okay, and we're going to come down to Motec. All right, let me take off that. Okay, so here we are. All right, driver general in our straight out of the box generic Motec workbook. All right, so the first time that you do Motec, when you click on add this, I actually may be doing it right now. Okay, so you have to tell it where to look for the telemetry files. And once you do, it's going to remember it forever and ever. Okay, so right now it wants to look in its own Motec folder. And obviously there's nothing there. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here. Where the hell's my documents? There we go. My documents. iRacing. Telemetry. And there it is. Okay. So I wish it would do this all the time, but it just, for some reason, I have to come in and put the recent to the top. So you don't really have to click on it. As long as it's highlighted, you're fine. Doesn't matter. As long as it's highlighted, you're good. Open. Poof. We have stuff. A bunch of squiggly lines. How about that? Oh, which reminds me, as far as telemetry goes, and let me look this up real quick, just so I can show you. I got a really, really cool book. Really cool book. It's called Making Sense of Squiggly Lines. It's $40, all right? I don't know where the see. Oh, this is the hardcover version. I don't know, $200. So somebody's on drugs. I don't know where these people get this stuff at. Why is this here? Making Sense of Squiggly Lines. Here's Michelle Obama. Jesus Christ. Okay, so Making Sense of Squiggly. Making Sense of Squiggly Lines. Oh, Christ help us all. All right. It's actually a really, really good book. It's very small. It's not like 1,000 pages long. I was gonna get this one too. I never got around to it. Excuse me. How many pages is this? 144 pages. It's not a lot, okay? And it's very, very easy to read. It's very insightful, and one of the big things that it does is it kind of tunes your brain into how to come up with new and unique ways to look at the data and be like, oh, I think this would be neat to figure out how to look at this. Like, I want to figure out how to look at this, but it's not in any of the direct channels that is going to be output. So you can look at it and you can say, huh, I bet you if I do this and then this, I can get what I want to see. Or you can look at, say, my spin in the wheels. You know, like if you're doing road course and stuff like that, like am I spinning the wheels as I'm coming out of a corner? You know, it's like, well, how do I look at wheel speed and figure out if I'm doing that or not? You know, that's just something like a channel that may not be specifically designed to provide you with a piece of information that you may be curious about, how to look at that anyway and still derive the information that you need from it. It kind of tunes your brain like that. Pretty neat. And it's a really good book, and it's not going to break the bank at $43. And so, yay. All right, so here we are with this. And you can see this is what they call throttle trace. And throttle trace versus corner speed, oh, it's in kilometers per hour. So we can change all that around. It's not a big deal. So G-force and different things like that, and what gear you're in, and some interesting stuff. Like if you wanted to see over the entire course of the run, you know, you can see what lap. You can double click on the laps, and you can see your out lap and your in lap. It automatically figures out what that is. So in the in lap, you can see it's just chilling in the garage, getting going. You can see yourself pedaling the throttle coming through the corner, and then onward down the track. So you can go to first lap, and then you can drag all the way through all of your other laps, and you can see, you know, here's your throttle trace. So real quick, you know, you're on a team, and real race teams do this all the time. Everybody shares all of their information. After, you know, NASCAR, everybody comes back into the pits on a team. Everybody plugs in their computers. Everything goes back to the engineers, and they can sit there and they can overlay all their drivers' telemetry over top of each other. So the drivers can come back and they can get together. And when you see them sitting in the car and practice, and they have like that tablet that they hang in front of them, they're looking at all this stuff. They're like, okay, what's, you know, my teammate doing? Like, what's his throttle trace look like on entry? What does his braking point look like? I mean, is he outbraking me? How is he outbraking me? And all this other kind of stuff. So that's all interesting stuff that you can do with telemetry. So like if you're on a team and say you guys have like a file sharing capability, I think Discord you can share files. I'm sure. I know TeamSpeak you can share files. Or if you just want to, you know, set up a Google drive in the cloud someplace, and you know you can just send all of your telemetry files up into the cloud, and you can share it with all your teammates, and then they can look and see what you're doing, and they can compare themselves. So yeah, that's a neat thing you can also do with this. But so, what's this engine one look like? Manifold pressure. You know, there's really nothing that we need for manifold pressure, but we can also see engine RPMs and things like that, which is very, very helpful whenever you're selecting gears. But as you can see, the general parameters of this particular workbook, we're turning more RPMs than what this is set up to see. So let me just keep going through all this stuff. Here's interesting tire information. See, it says center. It's looking for a channel called center, but iRacing doesn't output it like that. It outputs it as middle. Okay? So you're not going to have any information there. But just for example, as you're going through the corner, this is going to be in the middle of the corner. Like you can see the corners because you start loading up the tires and the heat's going to build up. You can see the difference. This is the front tire. So the outer is colder than the inner, which means dang it, sorry guys, that there's camber, okay? And here's the thing with um, contact patches. Like right now, this right here, that's a picture of your contact patch, okay? What I just did was, sorry, what I just did, I went from all of this, all these runs, I just went down to 1 lap, okay? And then you can look at this. This is a picture of your contact patch, okay? Essentially. So you can see going down the straightaway, the tire is actually cambered out, okay? And as you go into the corner, as the suspension compresses and the upper control arm starts pulling that tire inward, because that's just how the geometry up front works. As you go down the corner, down the straightaway, corner entry, you can see the tire actually leaning back forward, and then it starts leaning into the corner, okay? So what you see is that the inside of the tire is actually harder than the outside of the tire, which means the inside of the tire is being worked harder, which means it's in more contact with the ground than the outside. Okay, so that's right off the bat. This is how you look at your see what your tires are doing. Okay, so there's a friction circle and things like that, but essentially it just tells you your G-forces longitudinally, front and back, versus laterally, left and right. You can look at this. There's not a big deal of the importance of this particular one, but this one, on the other hand, is big. Oh my goodness! There's the herd. They hear someone outside. But you can look at the suspension and whatnot. So these are dampers. This is the shock. This is how fast they're moving back and forth, and the G-forces and things. And this is important. This is one that we're going to keep. And most of this other stuff is going to go away, and we're going to adjust it, because most of this stuff is, it's either Motec is looking for data that iRacing hasn't put out, or it's looking for data that iRacing has labeled differently. So it's looking for one thing, and iRacing calls it something different, so it's not being displayed at all. But with this is what we call a histogram, okay, and this is the shocks, and this is what the shocks look like. And if you see some of the other tutorials that I've done, is you want these pretty even, and luckily these are pretty even, except for the front. And the front on a stock car, you're always going to have more rebound than you do compression, because you want to keep that car, the nose of the car, down as long as humanly possible when you exit a corner and go down the straight, because the higher the car gets up, the less aerodynamic efficiency it has, and the more drag it has, and the slower you go. So there's that. Oh my goodness gracious. Just a second. Sorry about that. We have 2 huskies that won't say a word to anybody, and then we have a lab that barks at a leaf. And then we have the 2 little ones that are just so afraid of everything, they bark at everything. Okay. This FFT thing, you don't have to really worry about that. That's really, really high tech. All right. So let's get into some nitty-gritty stuff going on right here. And we're going to start off with the suspension. All right. So what we have here is we have this. It's a time distance graph. Okay. So if you look at add, and like I said right at the beginning, these were all grayed out because it didn't have any data to work with. So now that you have data, it says, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do that. So what we're using right now is the time distance graph. All right. Dang it. My mouse is a little screwy. But down here across the bottom, you have the time of the. Hold on, let me do it like this because I'm looking at the stream and it's not completely. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so now you can see what the heck I'm looking at. A lot of the overlay of the stream is hiding a lot of stuff. So here you have the time of the lap across the bottom, okay? And then you have all of your information. So along the x-axis, you have the time, and on the y-axis, you have the measurement of whatever parameter you happen to be looking at. So right now we have a whole bunch of this stuff that the hard half of we don't even see. So all right, we're going to do this. You're going to right-click, Properties. Okay, so here we go. In each one of these windows, and you can resize all these, and we're going to get to that here in a second. But on this particular one, I like to have it just like this. And then once we get into other things, you can start looking at moving different aspects around of this around. And we're going to go to tires, and that's where I'm going to show you. I'm going to use the tire workbook, or whatever they call it, to show you how to resize stuff and how to add things and really customize the display that you're looking at so you can get all the information. So right here, none of this stuff even works because it's not output by iRacing. So what we're going to do is really all this stuff is useless to us. So we're going to come in and we're going to add a channel. Okay? Click on Add Channel. And all of this stuff is what iRacing puts out. Okay? These are all individual telemetry, what we call channels, that iRacing measures within the sim and then outputs. Okay? So one of the things that we want to look at first, and there's a search term up here, but there's a lot that you can work with. I mean, a lot that you can work with. Okay? So one of the first things that I like to see is damper position. Okay? And let me look at some of this other stuff. Let me make sure that it's all here. Make sure I'm going to put up what I really want, because it's been a long time since I had to build all this stuff. Yep. Okay. We're going to do that. Add. And in order to make this a little bit easier, you can put in damper, and then it'll do that. Okay. So, I do want the fronts like that, and I accidentally loaded these up different. So you can go, bam, like that. Okay. And let me see if that's actually pull it up. Awesome. There we go. Good deal. Okay, so right-click again. That's kind of what we wanted. I just wanted to make sure that that was going to come up how it was. All right, so right now we're working in meters. Okay? If you want meters, you can. It's not that big of a deal. But, you know, if you're dealing with American cars, like especially stock cars, a lot of stuff is done in Imperial units. So, and if you're used to Imperial units, it's just easier to figure that out. So if you double click on each one of these individual things, it'll come up with the properties. Okay? And right now over here, you can see like it goes out to a massive amount of decimal places. We don't want any of that crap. All right? So you can come in to here, and you can select any of these. All right? So I want inch. And then I don't need decimal places. I need 3 decimal places. That's even a lot. You can even do 2. And then you look at the color. Okay? This is the color of the line that you're actually going to to be looking at. And I have a color scheme that I have in my head to make when I look at something, I know what I'm going to be looking at easier with just at first glance. So anything on the left, I use blue, okay? And then anything on the right, I will use red. So that way, R red, R right, okay? So inches, we're going to do 3. Is that what we did? 3? Yeah. No, we did 2 on the other one. My bad. Dose. Okay. So here's a really cool thing about this too. You can even input it like that. So we're looking left in the rear. We're going to do blue. In the right, we're going to do red. Okay. So here we are with that. All right. Awesome. So the damper position in the back, where this is deflection, okay? So when you're looking at stuff in the garage, it's almost like you're back at the shop. Okay? When you're in iRacing, okay, and you're in this screen, you're not at the track. You're actually in the shop, okay? Why the hell does that matter? Okay, so let's take a look at the shock deflection right here, the left front shock deflection, 4.74, okay? Let's come into iRacing, or into the telemetry. You can see this right here at the beginning? This is actually the car being dropped into the sim. Okay, that's pretty neat. And then as you sit here, once it settles out, all right, this is you sitting on pit road in the game. All right, 4.68, 4.74. They're different, okay? And that is all because in here, in your shop, you're actually sitting. You actually have the car sitting on what I think it's called like a leveling plate that is absolutely 100% perfectly level, okay? And in racing shops, you use those plates. I'm probably using the term wrong, but it's just a huge giant metal piece of steel that they have on the ground, and it's absolutely perfect millimeter level. And that's what they use to set the car up because it's repeatable. You know, if you set the car up at the track and you start trying to make suspension changes at the track, it's never going to be exactly right. Even if you take your scales, even if you take a scale to the track, like if I go to my track, if I set the car up in the garage here, and I set the crossweight and everything like that, and I take it to the track, and then while I'm at the pad, and I'm at pit slab at the actual track, it's going to be different because they're not perfectly level. So that's one of the things you're going to notice right off the bat is your deflections are going to be different. Okay, so that's just something interesting. All right. So this is all cool, I guess, but it doesn't really help you look at the overall picture of what's going on with the car, believe it or not. And real quick, also, you see how these are a little more closer together? Like 8.62 deflection in the back, 8.59 deflection in the back is actually really close. And that's because the mounting points of everything in the back of the car are pretty symmetrical, whereas the geometry in the front of the car is totally different. Okay, the mounting points of all the shocks and stuff, they're different in the front than they are in the back. The ones up front are not symmetrical because if you really want to get roll centers and all this other kind of high-tech gee whiz stuff that's later on down the tutorial line, if you really want to get that optimized in a race car, you can't have everything symmetrical. Okay, so anyway, that's why these shocks look completely different, or probably one of the reasons why they look completely different. So if we have two completely different pictures that don't give us a really good idea quite yet, because you're comparing apples and oranges. Well, we don't want to compare apples and oranges. We want to compare apples and apples. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a group. And here's the reason why we're going to do this. You see on the y-axis of the measurement of everything over here, how much this is compressed? It is so different that you lose a lot of detail and you lose a lot of context. Okay, so we don't want that. So I'm going to show you how we're going to work this. So we're going to split up the front shocks and the back shocks, right? So we want to do that. We're going to move you down. I'm going to take the right rear, move that down, and watch what it does to the presentation. Okay, it changes everything, right? So now the scale of the front shocks go from 0 to 5.4, a little bit more. So the scale that we're looking at is a lot different, and it's a lot more specific than if we added both of these two things together. So like when you're doing telemetry, you know, and you really want to focus in on something, this is one of the ways that you can do it. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. All right, and so we know that that we're already on the bump spring as it is. So as you're going through the corner, this is what it looks like. But you know, it's kind of hard to visualize, isn't it? So let's just take a quick peek at this. And you can actually move all this around. Okay? You can move and resize these windows within Motec. All right? So let's do a little something else too. I want to know where we are on the track. So we can add track position. Okay? And then you can just keep it like that. We don't have to worry about that yet. So, boom. Now we have the track. Okay? So we know, here we are going down the back straight, and you can see the little red dot going through, and then you can see the front. Now, what does this do? This kind of helps you see correlate your position on track versus what particular portion of this squiggly line you're looking at. Okay? So there's that. All right. So that's a neat thing you can do. We're going to maximize that out. Okay. Great. How does this help us? Okay, what we want to see right off the bat, and if you see from the setup process, one of the first things we need to do is set up ride heights, and we need to get the splitter. All right, so we don't have the splitter. Get to the splitter. So we need to figure out where the hell the splitter's at. All right, so we're going to add another group because we don't want the splitter mixed in with this data because it is completely unrelated, believe it or not. Well, it's related, but it's not related to the point where we can use it to efficiently discern what is happening with the car. All right, so let's start off first. We need some ride heights. All right, so let's take a peek at some ride heights. We're not looking at damn hairs. We're going to ride heights. Ride height. Yay. Okay. Front left. Boom. And we're going to add front right. Okay. And remember, we want, that's still in meters. 2 inches. Okay. And when you come down into the display limits, and this is how you're going to build in some accuracy and some repeatability in the display and what you're looking at. Okay, so right now when it's in auto, what it does is Motec goes, okay, this channel during the recording it went from, for number's sake, 1/2 of an inch. It measured from 1/2 an inch to 5 inches. Okay, cool. Let's add another inch on top of that, just so you can see there's a little bit of space in between where the top of the measurement goes and off the actual screen. And a little bit below, just so you can tell, just so you can have the line centered in the display. All right, so let me just show you this real quick on this. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, but I'm going to get both of these to inches. That's the right, so we're going to do red on that one. We're going to leave that at auto. Okay, so this is the front ride heights. All right, so boom, there we are, front ride heights. All right. The lowest number that you have here is 1.8, and the highest number that you have is like 3.8 on this scale. Awesome. When we look at ride heights, we are mostly interested in the relationship between the ride height and the surface of the track, right? So every run that we do, you may have this scale change from track to track to track, and it's really hard to visualize where the ride heights and stuff are in relationship to the actual track itself, because that's what we care about. So cool. What we're going to do is we're going to come back in here, and we're going to say manual, minimum, okay? You say 0, right? No, you don't want 0. You want negative 0.5, just a half an inch below. You want to see below the surface of the track, because what happens is that the channel that outputs, it'll actually read negative numbers, okay, when it outputs the data. So when you're looking at these squiggly lines, like, you want to see how far below the actual track that you're actually going, so you know how much of a major adjustment you need to make. And max, we'll do 4 inches for the front. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing with the back. Manual, minus 0.5, and the front, do 4. Okay, so we're identical, all right, because you don't want the Motec to start scaling the output different on the screen. Well, that should be blue. Sorry. You don't want it to be scaling it differently, because then the lines won't match up. Okay, they won't be overlaid properly. They'll be offset, and you're not going to see what level is. You know, it won't be level. So, okay, so here we go. Looking at the ride height through the corner here, and you can see exactly, there's a 0 line. Okay, you can see exactly how high we are above the track now. Okay, so awesome. All right, so there's that. We don't really want that. We want splitter. All right, so let's come down here and add another time distance graph. Okay, and we're going to tell it to look for splitter. I think it's... No, maybe it's not that. Maybe they changed that at the output. It used to be center front splitter. There it is. Okay, center front splitter ride height. That is what that means. Center front splitter ride height. We don't want meters. We want to keep the units together. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, those. And for me, I just kind of like having, because I'm going to use red and blue, so I'm going to need something in the middle that I can see. So I'm going to use green. All right. We're going to come down to manual, because we want to see if we're going to use the same philosophy. We want to see if the center front splitter is digging into the ground. So minus 0.5. And as far as the max height goes, the more range that you put in here, the less detailed the output is going to be, because the line is going to be much different. Let me just show it to you. Let's just say we're going to use following logically. Hey, we did the ride heights at the max at 4. Let's just keep the same scale. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so there's now your... We're going to organize this a little bit better. And so there's that. Okay. So here we are. So 4 inches high down there, and then that is the actual center middle part of the splitter and where it's traveling along the track. You can see as you go through the bumps, see how I told you it would go down to the negative? Minus 0.04. Okay? So right now we are just scraping that splitter along the track. And that's not a bad thing. If it was much lower than that, like if it was dipping down like to a minus half an inch or minus 3/4 of an inch, you know that you have some major serious issues going on. And for a full tank of fuel, this isn't bad, okay? Because as the fuel load burns off, you're actually going to start raising your ride heights, and this is going to start lifting up off the track. So this is where you start pre-planning down the line for a long run. It's like, okay, well, I can get the splitter off the track at the beginning of the race or at the beginning of a run and have a pristine handling race car, or I can compromise a little bit because, okay, the center front splitter may be scraping a little bit, but I have really, really good tires that'll overcome and balance out the bad handling that a scraping splitter is going to put into the car, and it'll all work out in the end. And in the end, while the tires wear out, we'll have the splitter up off the ground. So a little bit of forethought when you're setting up your race car. So, but there you go. And now everything is on the same scale. And once you start getting everything on the same scale, you get to do something a little cool. All right. So remember how I said earlier that we want to see the full picture of the splitter and how the splitter's doing. And we have been asking, I sent an email to iRacing a long, long time ago about asking for additional telemetry channels for the left side of the splitter and the right side of the splitter. And I even sent them an article from Automotive Engineering magazine that actually went and looked at the testing process that NASCAR teams use and how many sensors they have on the car. And they emailed me back and they're like, yeah, it's a really good idea. We'll pass this along to the telemetry folks on the staff. I never heard anything back. But so we got the center part of the splitter. We got a good picture of that, but that's not the full picture of what the splitter's doing. I mean, the splitter on the front of a NASCAR car is, I mean, heck, how wide is this thing? Good 3.5, maybe 4 feet, if not more. And all we're taking is the middle part. Well, if you look at anything, here, let me just use this pen. So like if this is the splitter, we're only looking at this point right here. Well, as you go through the corner, the cars dip, right? So, you know, they move. So while the center part of the splitter may be right above the track, if you roll into the corner, and this is the right side of the splitter, you actually may be dragging the right side of the splitter, which would make sense because when we got in the car, we couldn't really hold the bottom of the racetrack. So how in God's name do we do that? How do we figure it out? There's no channel. There's no telemetry output from iRacing to give us that picture. So how in God's name do we do that? Okay, well, you get into coming back up in here and you look at maths. Okay? Because remember how I said this is the formula. Okay? And these are the default ones that you get from Motec. So what we're going to do is, where's it at? Come down to user. Okay. We're going to add an expression. And it's going to populate this. All right. It's noodle time. And this is a semi-long process. But I'm going to do this long process for you. So whenever you come around and you want to do this on your own telemetry workbook, you can just come back and see exactly what I did. Okay. So first things first. How do you figure out what both sides of the splitter is doing? Well, it's a kind of a pain in the butt. All right. We need to look at at how this stuff works. Okay? And where all the different sensors are located on the car, because we need to know where those sensors are so we can tell how to proceed, right? So I'm going to bring this picture over, okay? So this is my horrific rendition of such an artist, okay, of the frame and the splitter of a NASCAR race car, okay? So obviously this big droopy looking thing is the splitter. Right here, okay, that is the sensor location for the center front splitter. Right there. Or there. It's in the middle. All right, it's in the middle. Okay, so back here, this is the ride height sensor location from what iRacing has said on the NASCAR vehicles, okay? We are going to assume that these frame rails are level. Like if you took the whole car apart and you just set the frame on the ground, these frame rails here are level, okay? And we're going to say that there's no twist in the frame all the way up to the front of the car. We have to make some assumptions, so that's going to be the assumption. And I've used this long enough, and some other teams have used this long enough that it seems to be valid. It seems to be a valid assumption to make. Okay, so there's that. All right, so here's that. Here's these. And I didn't want this to open up using paint, but no, don't save. Although I probably should have saved it. Okay, so let me open this up using a different, whatchamacallit. Okay, so frame rail. The sensor on the frame ride height is here, okay? And here's the splitter. So we know that this splitter is a certain distance below these frame rails. Like if you sat the car perfectly level in the shop, and these frame rails were level, and the C measurement were identical, okay? This going to be flat, that's going to be flat. Everything's flat and parallel to one another, okay? So you can say, all right, so the distance between these frame rails, where the sensor is, to where the sensor is on the splitter, they're the same. Because the splitter doesn't, it's not twisted. You know, like the frame rail don't sit like this and the splitter sits like that. That's not how it works. Okay, so we can make that assumption. All right? So then we go, okay, how do we figure out, we want to essentially invent a sensor here. We want to invent a sensor here. Okay? So that will give us far enough out along the splitter from the middle to see if it's level, to see if it's not level, if it's, you know, if we're rolling too much over into the corner and things like that. Okay, so, all right, how the hell do we do that? All right, cool. We need to figure out what C is, all right? So in order to figure out what C is, we need to figure out what A is. How the hell do you do that? Well, if you figure the distance between that frame rail and the distance between that frame rail, if you want in the middle, it's going to be the average of the two, okay? Cool. So we're going to make a channel that's going to figure that out, okay? Average front ride height. And we're going to use, I think this is length. What the hell is L? Length. Length and distance. We're going to do it in inches. We're going to make the output in inches. And we don't need any of that. Everything else is fine. So you're going to come down in here. You're going to go, okay, well, how the hell are we going to do this? All right. To get the average of anything, you add everything up and then divide it by the number of variables that you used. Okay? So that. Ride height. Okay, so we want the the left ride height. Double click. There we go. Add the right ride height up front. Close the parentheses. And you can see down here in this, all channels are valid. That means you haven't screwed up yet and it makes sense. All right? And divide that by, we have two variables in here. Divide that by 2. All channels are valid. You're not an idiot. Yay. Okay. All right. So we just made our first math. Okay? We actually invented a new telemetry channel. All right? So I use this for a few other things. All right, so we're gonna, while we're here, we're gonna do this too. Okay, actually, we're gonna do this an even more fun way. All right, take that, right click, copy, right click, paste. Sweet. Because I want to know what the rear ride heights are doing too, because the rear ride height sensors, they follow the same principle as the front. They're right along the frame rails, and the frame rails on a circle track car are normally parallel, and they go straight back from the front to the back. They're the same. Okay, so we're gonna have to rename this because we want to know what the rear is. We're doing this for the rear, so our rear, and we can take away that parentheses 1, because, you know, just in any file, anytime you make a copy of a file, the system automatically puts in parentheses, this is copy number 1, 2, 115. Okay, so we know ride height front left, ride height front rear. We can just replace the F with an R, and we know that'll be rear. R. All channels are valid. You haven't screwed up. Boom. Average rear ride height. Sweet. So we're starting to get pretty cluttered right here. Okay? And we don't really need to know. Oh, yeah, we do. Okay. I was going to say we don't really need to know what the damper positions are as far as the deflections, but actually we do. So let's come back in here and the properties of this one up here, and let's add another group and another channel, and we're going to do front, there it is, average front ride height. Boom. Then we're going to add rear. Oh, average rear ride height. Thank you. Okay. And we're going to come back in here because we didn't really get to do that. We're going to change from that to manual. And we're going to go from, we're going to do this at 0 because you're never going to get the frame rails below the track ever. But we're going to use 0 because it's a nice, we want to keep everything consistent. We want to keep the reference plane the surface of the track for as much stuff as we possibly can, with the exception of the splitter, because we all know how bad we're digging the damn thing in. Okay? So we're going to try 10 inches for the ride height. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Let's try 5. Let's see how that works out for the front. Let's see how this works out for the, well, we can tell the back is already going to be bigger, so crap. Manual, 0. Let's do 8. We'll come back over here and we'll fix this too, so we have the same scale. 8. All right. Oh, they're the same damn color. Damn you, OCD. Make the front blue. Okay, so now it's easier to look at. The front ride height's blue and the back ride height's red, and we can see rake. Now we can see what the rake is of the car. So cool. So now we know we have about a 2.1 inch rake. How does that even come into play? All right, why do we want to know that? All right, in a NASCAR, since you can't adjust the angles of any of the aerodynamic downforce creating items on the car, and the splitter's set and the spoiler is now set. You can't adjust that at all. So how you adjust the amount of aerodynamic downforce the car is producing is by rake. Okay, so when you're in a car in a NASCAR and you're like, okay, we're here at Charlotte, you can start messing around with the rake until you can optimize the aerodynamic downforce on the car. Once you get the front splitter sealed, level, you can start raising the rear ride height or lowering the rear ride height to the point where you can get optimal downforce versus drag. So that's how you use this, okay? One of the ways. The other way is we're still using this to figure out the front splitter. Okay, cool. Well, this really doesn't give us a hell of a lot. But what this does now is this gives us point A on here. Okay? That's what that is. Okay? This line is A. So you can see the center of the ride height up in front, the average is 2.09. The center front ride height is 2.2. All right? So now we're going to use that to get C. And this is how we do it. It's very, very simple. Okay, here we back are. I'm going to add an expression. Okay. And I don't even know. That's what we'll do. Ride height to center, front ride height to center front splitter distance. It doesn't matter what it is because we're not actually going to display it. We just need this to be figured out in the background so we can use this. Okay? I really hope you've been sitting around and figuring this out because this is actually really neat. Okay, so how the hell do we figure this out? So we come down, average front ride height,